Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to talk about my close calls with COVID. So I had already filmed this video because I was in close contact with my nephew who eventually tested positive for COVID. Um, so I had done that video and then, was talking about how I got through it and the things that I did. And then before I got a chance to upload that video, my dad got COVID. So I decided to just kind of make them all into one video because, I didn't want to speak. I didn't want to upload the other video and speak too soon because then my dad got sick and I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to be talking about what I did to avoid getting COVID and then end up getting COVID anyways, if that makes any sense. So, what happened was that, my brother got COVID for Christmas. So, this is like over a span of 2 months, all of this, craziness. My brother got COVID for Christmas, over Christmas, like a couple days before. And about 5 days had passed, and his wife got sick, but his kids did not. So around day 5, neither one of his kids had gotten sick. And so his wife had well, I don't know if it was his wife or him, but they asked my mom if they could leave the kids, bring the kids over here with us. So I think they were probably trying to prevent the kids from ending up sick. And if you guys have been watching my channel for a while, my nephew is a leukemia survivor. And so, that may have played a part in it. I just think that they really didn't want the kids to get sick and, also just to not be locked up inside the house because my brother and his wife were sick and they had to isolate. So basically, they dropped off the kids on I think it was like Wednesday night, and Thursday morning, my nephew wakes up and he's not feeling well. There is a longer story here. I think I went into more detail in the other video that I made, but basically there was, some kind of hiding and concealing of what was actually going on. And so by the time my sister-in-law found out that my nephew was sick, it was already Friday evening. So he was with us the whole time. He was sick, you know, Thursday and then almost, all of Friday. So I want to pause really quick and give a couple of quick facts because I did start Googling stuff just to make sure, just to see um, what my probability was of getting sick. So basically, you're the most contagious, I believe, the day before and the day of when you start having symptoms. So the day before you start having symptoms, and then the day of. And then I think those first 5 days are probably the most contagious, and then after that, it kind of drops off. You can get sick if you're in contact with somebody that has COVID. You can get sick between 3 and 14 days after your contact with that person. Um, it has happened. I believe that I read that there have been some cases where it's like a month later, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But for the most part, I think the average is like 3 to 6 days or something after you're in contact with someone with COVID, which is exactly what happened with my nephew. He got sick on day 6 of post exposure to my brother, which my sister-in-law said that they really weren't in close contact because they kind of separated the kids from them. But I mean, you're still in the same household, and basically what they tell you to do is to stay within your household. Even if the other people are not sick, just try to isolate from those other people, but stay within the same household. It was not the smartest decision to bring the kids over here, even though it had been several days. My niece never got sick, by the way, but my nephew did. But like I said, there may have been some fear or something going on there because of my nephew's medical history. So I understand that. I understand that there could be that underlying the whole situation. So one of the things that I did that one of my doctors recommended, and there's another video that I have on here called like my COVID survival kit or my COVID survival guide, something like that. I have a doctor that kind of is a little bit alternative. She's a little bit of a rebel, and so she told me to spray betadine spray um, twice a day and gargle with Listerine because those have been proven to betadine has been proven to reduce the length of your of a cold if you have some kind of a viral thing, and Listerine is supposed to like disinfect, your throat or whatever. And obviously, COVID gets into your sinuses and your nose, and then also in the back of your throat. That's where it kind of sticks. So I did that for basically the day that they arrived. I started doing the nasal spray and then up until like 2 days after they left. So I think I started doing it Wednesday all the way to Sunday. By the time Sunday rolled around, I had a really bad sinus headache, and so I knew I had to stop. So I stopped the betadine after 5 days, kept doing the Listerine for a few more days, and then stopped. Once I got to like day 7, I kind of felt like I was in the clear. Um, because like I said, between 3 and 6 days, I think is the average. I think 3 days is the average. After your exposure to someone that has COVID. So I don't know. I just was like, you know what? I think I should be fine. I was in contact. I did not wear a mask at all when he was here, and they did not wear masks either. And I was in relatively close contact with my nephew, but just for short periods of time. And not like super close contact, but generally close contact. So that was the situation with my nephew. Now, fast forward a month later. So that was after Christmas, but before New Year's. So that little gap between Christmas and New Year's, because we didn't get to see my brother for Christmas. So that happened then. And then, let me pull out my calendar. By the end of January 24th to be exact. So keep in mind that's like a month. Yeah, that's like a month because my nephew was here after Christmas before New Year's. So 26th, 27th, 28th, something like that. And my dad gets sick with COVID around the 24th. So my mom actually, they had a trip planned to Mexico. He, for whatever reason, decided that he didn't want to go. I don't know. I think it's just, financial, they just, he just figured it's not worth the money for me to go. It wasn't because of COVID, because he didn't have COVID yet. But he just told my mom, you know what, why don't you go visit with your family, and then, just whatever, just go. So my mom left for Mexico that day. My dad was already sounding kind of like hoarse. He sounded kind of weird, kind of like when you have like a sinus thing or whatever. So he didn't have, that's all he had on the 24th. And so he took her to the airport, dropped her off, came back. He had done a COVID test, which again, the COVID tests that we have are mostly expired. We only had like 2 boxes that were new COVID tests. And so I think he did an expired one, and my mom basically told me he doesn't have COVID. Because I told him, I said, "Are you sick?" Because he sounded so weird, and my mom's like, "He doesn't have COVID. We already tested him." So with that answer, how she was very short with me, I already suspected that something was going on. He dropped her off at the airport. He came back. I was like, whatever. None of us were wearing masks. I think he was wearing a mask. I can't remember. But at that point, because that test had come back negative, that expired test, I don't think we were really taking much precaution. So keep in mind, he was sounding sick on the 24th, but if you're the most contagious the day before, then he would have been the most contagious on the 23rd. And at this point, we were not isolating or masking or anything like that. And he was also in very close contact with my mom and my sister, because I think my sister went with them to the airport. So they were all in the car together. I didn't go with them to the airport. So, next morning on the 25th, he wakes up and he's feeling a lot worse. His head is hurting. Um, he's just not feeling good. And, he didn't take his temperature or anything, but my nephew did have a slight fever when he was with us. And so my dad was, I'm pretty sure my dad had the same thing. They had the exact same symptoms. So when I looked up the information about how long it takes to develop COVID symptoms after an exposure, um, they have documented some people coming down with COVID a month after their exposure, but it's very rare. My dad had the exact same symptoms as my nephew, literally the same. Waking up with a headache, having trouble sleeping, that night, just feeling really tired. Like my dad passed out on the couch, just like my nephew. I mean, it was exactly the same. And when I started seeing all of his symptoms, I was like, he has COVID. I was like, I'm pretty sure he has COVID. I mean, it was the same thing that my nephew had, but it was like a month apart, like over a month apart. So we went through this whole rigmarole because at that point I was like, I started masking, he started masking, and he was like, well, the test came back negative. And I'm like, don't trust those tests. I was like, you need to go to a clinic and get the other one. What is it called? A PCR test or whatever. So we went through this whole thing where, I'm masked up and I'm asking him for his insurance cards because he doesn't know how to schedule an appointment. This whole thing. And I'm just like, oh my God, like this is such a mess. And so we scheduled him. He went to CVS, the drive-through. They do the drive-through testing. And we didn't know until the day after. So keep in mind, this is the 25th. We didn't find out until the 26th that his test came back positive. So my dad did, in fact, have COVID. At that point, I was already spraying with betadine again. I decided to follow the same protocol because I was like, well, I didn't get COVID last time and I wasn't wearing a mask. This time I'm going to do it again and see, just to be on the safe side. I did remember that horrible sinus headache that I got, and I was like, well, I'm either going to have to choose between the sinus headache or COVID. And the sinus headache went away after a few days of stopping the betadine. So I was like, you know what? I should be fine. So did the betadine. I did it for 9 days this time. So I started probably the day that my mom left, which was the 24th. And I did it for 9 days straight. And yes, I started developing the headache again. I did the betadine with the Listerine. Sometimes I even did the betadine 3 times a day instead of just 2 times. And we were masking up. He isolated in the family room, which is divided by a sliding glass door. And I basically spend most of my time in my room, but I was eating in the kitchen for several days without a mask. Until I stopped the betadine, and then I decided I was just gonna start eating in my room and just in case, because I wasn't doing the betadine anymore. So he, the to me the big issue was the bathrooms. We have 3 bathrooms, so we have more than enough bathrooms. But my dad had the bright idea of using 2 of the bathrooms. So he started showering upstairs, which he never does. And the cool thing about our shower upstairs is that it is actually, it can actually be blocked off by a pocket door. So there's a pocket door. If you close that door, the shower is basically isolated from the rest of the bathroom. So he very well could have used that bathroom, but just kept that door closed and left the shower totally isolated from the rest of it. And that way I could have used that shower. But he didn't. He got the bright idea to start showering upstairs, which he never does. He usually showers downstairs. So he was using the shower upstairs and the bathroom upstairs, and then using the bathroom downstairs. So we have 2 showers. I couldn't use either one, and I couldn't use either one of those bathrooms. The other bathroom that we have is one downstairs. It's right by my room, and that one has a jacuzzi tub and a toilet. it doesn't have a shower. So this was like, it was a real challenge because obviously taking a bath is very different than taking a shower. Baths are nice, but um, it was, it doesn't leave you as clean, and it was kind of gross. But I did that for probably 2 solid weeks, just taking a bath, washing my hair in the bathtub, and all of that. Because there's, the one thing is that, me and my dad were not in close contact, that whole time. Sometimes we would be in the kitchen at the same time, but we would be wearing a mask, or he would not be very, very close to me. And he actually, after he got that positive COVID test, he really took it seriously. So he did stay, like, if he could see me from the family room, if I was in the kitchen, he wouldn't come into the kitchen. He would wait until I left. And he always had like a little mask on. And then I started using my N95. So we did a pretty good job kind of coordinating that. But the bathroom situation was what I was most worried about, because you're looking at a very small space. And that's where there are issues, is when you're in a very enclosed space or in close contact with someone. And, I read that COVID can stay in the air for about 20 minutes. So if we did share a bathroom, we would have to wait like 20 minutes or more between sharing that. But the ventilation, particularly in one of the bathrooms downstairs, actually both of the bathrooms downstairs have very, very poor ventilation. One of them has like zero ventilation. So I really was trying to avoid using any of the bathrooms that he was using, just to eliminate that possibility of getting sick from being in that enclosed space that he had just been in. And he would go in there and like I could hear him like hacking or clearing his throat, and I was like, I am not doing that. So, what happened? That was January 24th. So after 2 weeks, looking at my calendar here again, we are now, today is February something, February 19th. So basically I still kept masking after 2 weeks, but at that point, you're basically not contagious. I think you're not contagious after like 10 days is what they say. But I was really concerned about getting COVID because I have a lot going on right now. You guys know what happened with the exosome situation, but something else also happened. And so I want to make this very, very clear for those of you that are watching this video. Yes, I did use the betadine spray. Can I say for sure that that's what kept me from getting sick? No. But I didn't get COVID. I haven't gotten COVID yet. I don't know if I will eventually get COVID like my dad did, which was like a month later. I'm hoping that I don't. If I do, I will have to not upload this video. But at this point, it's the 19th. It's been a solid, I think a solid month since his most contagious time, but it's been a good 3 weeks. You know what I mean? But I did use the betadine quite a bit for those first 9 days. And then I had to stop because I was starting to have that sinus headache again. Well, what ended up happening is that after I stopped, the sinus headache wouldn't go away, and it just kept getting worse. And I started panicking. I knew I didn't have COVID because I could smell everything. I had no other symptoms. I had no fever. I had no fever, no chills, no nothing. I just had a horrible sinus headache, like almost like a migraine. And after 3 days, and keep in mind, this whole time there was a lot of other stuff going on. This full 2 weeks that my mom was gone, there was a lot going on. I had some issues with my car. That's going to be another video. So after 3 days, I was like, I know I need to talk to a doctor. But if I go to urgent care, knowing that I've been in somewhat close contact with somebody that's COVID positive, and of course, when you have some kind of a symptom that can be related to COVID, they start asking you questions. I remember at the urgent care that I usually go to, they would call you. You would stay in your car and they would call you and they would give you like a quiz. Like they would ask you several questions to make sure that you didn't have COVID before they allowed you into the clinic. And so I was just like, I don't want to go through that. I don't want to drive all the way over there because I do drive to an urgent care that's about 20 minutes away. because I like that urgent care. So I decided to just call and see if they would do a phone appointment, and they actually did. So she called me. I just stayed by my phone. She called me, and as soon as I told her my symptoms, she said, "You have a sinus infection." And I was like, "Are you sure?" Like, I thought that my sinuses were probably just irritated because I kept spraying, my nose with it. She's like, you have a sinus infection." She was like, "I've never heard of that spray. I've never heard of that for COVID." She said, "But you need to go on antibiotics. You need to do a Z-Pack." So that was a whole other situation. So I was on a Z-Pack for 5 days. As you guys know, I have a lot of digestive issues, a lot of problems, and I'm going to have to make a video about that separately. But I did relatively well on that medication. It's a zithromycin. Yes, my sinus infection went away. So she was right. I did have a bad sinus infection. And obviously, I'm rethinking whether the next time I have a COVID exposure to use that spray, because it was really horrible. It was really bad. And I also can't keep doing antibiotics every time something like that happens, because that results in other issues. For example, diarrhea, dysbiosis, and other, stomach type, issues. And it takes also several days for me to bounce back from that if I ever do. So I want to make it clear that I don't know for a fact that the betadine kept me from getting COVID. It did give me a sinus infection, that I can say. But I think wearing my N95 was very helpful, and then just keeping a good distance away from each other. I think one of the things, my dad, the reason I keep thinking that my dad did get COVID from my nephew, even though it was like a month apart, is because they were in very close contact with each other. He was in very, very close contact, and they were in enclosed spaces together. For example, in the car, because I think he took them like they went to the market together, and then they went for a walk together, and then they were sitting on the couch together, and they were in very close contact. And he even told my nephew, "You don't need to wear a mask. Like, don't wear your mask." So, I think that close contact and conversations, talking and that kind of thing is probably the biggest predictor of whether you're going to get COVID from someone. And I want to say that the N95 mask was probably, or any kind of mask really, because I wore the N95 and then I wore some other masks, but just kind of keeping distance away from each other. And then after about 2 weeks and change, I stopped wearing a mask. The house was basically aired out. But, we were touching a lot of the same things. We were touching the microwaves. We were touching the refrigerator. We were touching a lot of the same surfaces. He said that he was using sanitizer on his hands. I wasn't. I just was like, I don't have the patience for this. But I don't think surfaces play as much of a role as just general close contact. But anyways, that's my story. If you guys want any more details about the situation, let me know. I will have to do another video talking about the sinus infection and how that went, because that was another ordeal. And then the week before the sinus infection was another ordeal. It was like 3 weeks of just hell. Like, it was just a nightmare 3 weeks, plus running around and, getting things done. So, thank you so much for joining me, you guys. If you have any other suggestions for anything, any other videos you would like me to make, I'm kind of running out of ideas here. I have other things. I've been kind of busy doing some other stuff. So just leave me some suggestions down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.